Welcome to Lunch with EFI. We've got another full house today.
Full meal.
Full meal. We have every dish accounted for as of about 4 minutes ago. And so
this is a 3-course 2 martini lunch.
That's right. That's right. So welcome. We appreciate everyone tuning in, and we're going to start. We're going to kick this off here with an appetizer. And this is old news for people that were paying attention to the NBER's website. But this working paper came out in April of this year. It's called The Effects of School Phone Bans, National Evidence from Lockable Pouches. So everyone, regardless of your position on this issue, will have heard that this is a hot topic in K-12 policy circles. Practitioners love this. The teachers in classrooms want cell phones locked up in pouches, put away, which makes sense. I think that's just good, fewer distractions. The advocates for this policy say it melts kids' brains to have screens in front of them all the time, and beyond distractions, obviously they'll do better in a myriad of ways. So the question,
what's the argument against?
The argument against, I think, is mainly from the parents' point of view. They say, look, of course I don't want my kid distracted, but I also want them accessible. I want, if there's an emergency, whether it's a family emergency or a school emergency or whatever, I want to be able to reach my kid. And I don't want to have to go through the front office to get to my kid. I gave them a cell phone for a reason. I want to stay in touch with them.
Okay.
So that's the parents' point. And I think that's a fairly rational point of view. It's a reasonable take. But, and then you have everything in between, right? There are a lot of positions people will take on it. But my question is, do they work? Now,
and what's the outcome for working?
What's that?
What's the outcome for working?
So that's exactly my question.
Okay.
What does work mean? Cell phone bans work absolutely in the sense that there was a drop from cell phone usage in class from 61% to 13%. So it worked.
So then 61% of classes had cell phone use of kids. Do we know what those numbers mean, or whatever it is? It's a drop.
It's a drop.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a drop and the way that they did it was they used GPS data. And so basically what they said was the number of pings to a GPS satellite went down from 61% on a daily basis to 13% in a given class.
Researchers rivaling Meta in how well they will track your children.
Right. Pretty amazing, actually. I'm surprised who gave them access to the data. I did wonder that. But so then the question is, in what sense? In this sense, it worked, right? We can say, sure, cell phone bans worked. It went from 61 to 13. That's a big, significant drop. But in every other measurement, there's basically no change.
So that's just a measure of implementation effectiveness. That is, if you adopt a ban by requiring students to put it in a pouch, do you implement it effectively? That is, do they really put their phones in the pouch and not have a phone available to them otherwise? And the answer is mostly yes. So they can implement it effectively, but does it have any consequence for their learning? I assume there were test outcomes. What other behavior outcomes? What other outcomes are they looking at?
Yep. So short term, so suspensions, you can see those went up in the short term, but then it mostly flattens out, and it's just there are no effects over the course of
And
3
how many of
years.
those suspensions are suspensions for violating the phone policy?
Oh, right. So that's it. All of this is interesting, and so what it comes down to, at least in my reading of it, there's a famous quote by Peter Drucker, the management guru, that says, "What gets measured gets managed," right? And so they did it. They were measuring cell phone use, and it went from 61 to 13. But by every other measure, there are null effects over 3 years. So I don't know what does everyone else think on this. I know for my own kids, I have preferences, right? I don't like my kids having their cell phone out just playing on it during class time. I don't want them doing that. But
I totally believe this, by the way. So while I completely support districts and schools that want to adopt these policies, the suggestion that this is the explanation for why kids are struggling academically and behaviorally never seemed compelling to me.
right.
If schools want to do this for other reasons, great. If parents, want to get together because they just think, it's like an addiction recovery that you have to like take a break from your electronic device, and that might just be therapeutic. Great. But the idea that this is the cause of our academic and behavioral problems, it sounds like BS. And I always thought, Jonathan Haidt and his kind of marketing of the science says something about the science doesn't say it. It's not his science. It feels a little bit to me like whenever people start talking about the science of reading, I'm totally in agreement with what those people advocate for. And I think it's great that schools want to try those techniques for teaching reading. But the idea that it's scientific or scientifically supported feels like an overstatement and an abuse of science. And it feels very much like all of the other kind of abusive uses of science with respect to climate change or COVID or anything else. It just feels excessive. There are things the science really does show. Vaccines really do work, things like that. But
I thought I read somewhere that the rise of social media canceled out all the enormous academic benefits of Common Core. Did I read that somewhere?
Well, Common Core was scientifically based. I also or brain-based research. That's always my favorite. That's sort of like
the smart regulation.
We would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those meddling kids and their dog, right?
Based means I held a journal while I typed in the requirements of this policy. I held one in my hand. I put it underneath the laptop. It was based on it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Jay, on this, and I've always been a little skeptical. And I'm a fan of a lot of Jonathan Haidt's work. I think he does some good work here and there. But on this particular point, I've always been a little skeptical. And maybe it's because I have adult kids and teenage kids, and I don't know. My personal experience just tells me that his claims about the magic effects of removing screens from classrooms altogether, just I don't know. They never really. I was never convinced, and so. But having said that, like I said, I'll reiterate. I don't want my kids on their phones when they're supposed to be learning. I don't think that that's useful or helpful. Do I think that the solution is to ban the presence of cell phones altogether in every class? No, I don't think that's it either.
I think it's perfectly fine as a ban, though, right? It's just don't say science says. Just say this is something that we'd like to try and see how it goes.
I agree with you on that point, Jay. One thing where I might disagree with you a little bit is you were talking about the costs in, academic or emotional terms. But I actually think the most important dimension to this is social. Abigail Schreier writes about this, right? Like that there was a time when young people, went out and they engaged in some healthy debauchery, and sometimes they drank or hooked up, and like that was actually probably a healthy part of their development. And now they're just they have their face.
I agree.
fixed
No, it's a drug addiction, right? We have a drug addiction problem.
The thing that scared me is it was 10 years ago. I was at a McDonald's in Hong Kong, and I saw a group of students who looked like they were probably high school age, and they were eating together, and they were all like I didn't see them share a word with each other in the time that they were eating there. It made me nervous.
I agree entirely, and I totally support communities and schools that want to crack down on this stuff and ration access for children, because it just strikes them as something that doesn't seem right. But what bothers me is just the abuse of the authority of science. That's all.
Yeah.
Mm.
But and
healthy debauchery is
making decisions unless someone puts on a lab coat and invokes. We don't have access to traditional forms of authority that people used to have. Like a responsible person, a wise person said, this probably isn't a good idea, and that used to be enough. But now you have to have a p-value for people.
Right. No, I agree with you. We didn't need this study. That's the reality.
No. I mean, the study is great only in that it shows how false all the science claims are.
And sometimes the p-value isn't much better than goat entrails. So,
let me consult with the bones.
But we make fun of goat entrails, but the priests were probably fairly wise and astute to the context, and probably on average said true and beneficial things.
But the people wanted to know what the goat entrail said, and they could fudge the data any way they wanted to, and nobody would notice. And that's pretty much what's still going on in social science.
Well, the bile does seem, the liver seems
right. Just need to do a little bleeding, and he'll be fine. We'll get his humors back into balance. But yeah, so look, obviously the cell phones are problematic. Whether they explain everything, probably not. Are they explaining some of the decline we've seen? Probably. But we know that kids are, especially illiterate kids, are getting even more illiterate. So maybe Ian could dive into the data and explain to us what's going on.
It was George W. Bush who famously asked, rarely is the question asked, is our children learning? And thankfully, thanks to NWEA, we're getting a new status check on this question. So for folks who don't know, NWEA is a testing vendor that a lot of districts and schools use to really gain understanding in terms of how their students are stacking up in terms of outcomes, in terms of growth, relative to the millions of students who take those same tests. And so they just published some results that are gaining some attention across the ed policy landscape. What it showed was that in middle school reading, for students in the 50th and 90th percentile, there was a dip, not an enormous dip, but a dip that coincided with the COVID pandemic and school shutdowns. And that those students in those performance categories then sort of flatlined. But for students who are in the 10th percentile in middle school reading, they have continued to trend downward since the pandemic. So my first reaction is, and obviously we were being cheeky there with the title, but I'm almost not entirely sure how to make sense of the results, because if we're talking about 10th percentile or less in middle school reading, I have to think that means functionally illiterate. Considering the number of students who are graduating high school without being able to read. So I'm not actually even entirely sure how to interpret that decline, nor do I have an immediate or obvious explanation for why I believe it's occurring, but it's something that's out there and something that other folks are talking about. So I suppose we should too.
I mean, anecdotally, and Matt and I have been talking about this for some time. Like the district system in Arizona seemed to break during COVID. Like it's fallen and it can't get up. And it has more money than it's ever had, both in absolute and in per student terms. But, you know, like in our NAEP data in 2022, everyone took a hit. Then we had 2024 NAEP, our charter school sector, you know, which is about 20% of the total in Arizona, bounced back, but the districts just kept getting worse, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I am at a loss. I don't understand exactly. You know, I mean, we did throw $190 billion at the public school system, all of which they seems to have completely squandered. You know, I mean, they did something with
the next billion would have done it.
That was
we were
magical.
just short.
Right. And 191 billion, that would have done it, right? This is very distressing. I mean, the public schools are warehousing kids, especially low-income disadvantaged kids. It's that term is more apt now than it has probably ever been, right? And they're warehousing them at a greater cost than they've ever had before. And the system just seems entirely hapless and dysfunctional.
Doesn't this, though, invite the kind of broader, bolder solutions? That is that what we really need to do is fix society, fix poverty, fix social ills, that this actually proves that schools alone can't, because it's low-income kids who were already scoring towards the bottom, who've been struggling the most to catch up. And so schools can't do the catching up. Look, we've spent as much as we can possibly spend. That's because we're spending in the wrong place. We got to spend it with wraparound services, a doctor in the school, social workers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So So how do you rebut that argument? People, you just say to people, "This sucks. Apparently, we can't fix it." People,
we need more socialism to save our socialistic public school system. I mean, yeah, okay. If you want to wait around for that, be my guest. The solution that a lot and growing number of American parents are taking is to find the exit, right?
I wonder though. I mean, in terms of just talking about how badly the districts are failing, part of that failure is just actually an inability to get the kids into the school who are supposed to be there. Right. And so in terms of this performance decline among those lowest performing students, I wonder if what we're actually seeing is that's just an increase in the number of middle school students who just aren't coming to school.
That could very well be, but I mean, it's not like the school systems are helpless in this. Like we've seen successful efforts before to reduce, absenteeism and whatnot. And they've been had a gigantic amount of money injected in, supposedly to remediate students and to do, I mean, that money's basically gone now. And
kids hate school, don't want to go. The solution is
more school.
More school.
Also,
right? School's not working.
We have to do high intensity tutoring, right? High intensity tutoring. We
not
failed
low intensity.
Not low intensity. We have failed to teach your child how to read and do basic math during school hours. So we're going to do, we're going to put the same people in charge of after school. We're actually going to get it to work.
They hate it all day long. They'll love the next hour that you have.
Well, and it's class sizes. Obviously that's the problem. The data says the opposite, but don't pay attention to the data. It's large class sizes. That's the problem. The teacher can't get to every kid to provide
one-on-one. It's the one-on-one attention. But of course, 1-on-1 means that instead of Emerald, you get the Fry guy.
Right.
That's right. Emerald's a great reference, by the way.
little dated, huh?
I would get in debates all the time with people on the other side, back when we used to have civil discourse and actually talk to the people on the other side. But they would say, we just need to spend more money. We need to spend more money. And anytime I would ask, okay, well, how much is enough? They could never answer that question, because the honest answer is always more.
Yeah.
Because if they would actually give a figure, which is very rare, and they would say, 15 or 20,000, I would point out, well, in Washington, D.C., they're already spending more than that. In New York, they're already spending more than that. So why aren't those schools the best in the country?
Because the dumb, bad people are doing it, and if smart, good people could spend it in the right way. Right. And but this is, there's a lot of we have failed catastrophically, so give us more.
Give us more money.
It's a very common kind of argument. So Harvard made this pitch recently to conservative donors who are super reluctant to give any more money to Harvard. And Harvard's like, we hear you. We understand. Intellectual diversity is something that's really important to us too. Why don't you give us money to create an intellectual diversity fund for us to expand the diversity of our intellectual offerings at Harvard? So it's like the $50 billion you already gave us in endowment. That doesn't count. It'll cost you extra to get intellectual diversity. So, warehousing your kid, that costs, $20,000 a pop. But if you want to teach them to read, that'll cost you more.
Well, there's something to William F. Buckley's statement that he would rather be governed by the first 100 names in the Boston phone book than the faculty at Harvard. But we're getting closer and closer to a position where one party is the PhD workers' party. And so, Jay, why don't you take it away? What happened last night?
Sure. So the primary election results came in. It appears in one key race, the Senate primary in Michigan, that El Said squeaked out a very narrow victory after having been expected to trounce Stevens, his opponent, by more than 10 points, according to polling, and according to the betting markets, he was supposed to crush her. No, he barely got by, maybe with a 1% margin, which does not augur well for the party's prospects this fall, with him as the standard bearer in that contest. But there were other interesting little tidbits, in particular, where it is that each of these candidates got their support. El Said overwhelmingly got his support from areas that were high educated white. And so this is Washtenaw County, which is where Ann Arbor is, and Wayne County, where Detroit is, which has a higher working class and Black population. Stevens outperformed El Said. So you get this weird thing where the progressive candidate, the one favored by the endorsed by the Democratic Socialists, doesn't appeal to Blacks or workers, but does appeal to the highly educated young crowd, which is the University of Michigan. But it's not just highly educated young crowd; it's also very heavily foreign crowd. So it is also the case that universities have basically been on a foreign hiring and importing binge, because they have no caps on it. And so motivated foreigners who want to get into the US have very few options to enter legally. But one place where there's completely unhindered access to living and working in the US and potentially staying forever is our higher education system. There's no limit on F1 visas. There's no limit on H1B visas for higher education. I wrote a report about this for the Defense of Freedom Institute that came out recently, and the run-up in those numbers is staggering. And people misunderstand F1 visas, which are the student visas for non-U.S. nationals in higher education. They're not mostly undergrads. Two-thirds are graduate students. And the way to think about graduate students is they're mostly workers, not students. They run the university. They do all of the things that universities need to do that professors no longer want to do. They teach intro classes, they run the laboratories, they do everything. They are the grape pickers of universities, and highly motivated foreigners with enough resources to get into the US, all they have to do, it's not hard to find some place that will take you in some PhD or master's program. And then once you're in, you can then continue to work at the university under the optional practical training or OPT program, still with your F1 visa for up to 3 years. And then you can also get an H1B visa, because universities are unlimited in their ability to use H1B visas to hire. In addition, while on an F1 visa, even before OPT, foreign students are not allowed to work anywhere outside of the university, but they are allowed to work at their university. So even the master students who are paying tuition and who don't have a fellowship to teach intro classes, they still are scrounging for every job they can find on campus, in labs, being an adjunct, whatever they can do, because the only place they can earn any money while they're in the US is at the university. So now, mind you, this is also a very captured pool for universities. They love this. A bunch of people can't work, so they don't have to pay them very well or anything. It's great. But what happens over time is these folks become citizens, and they begin to contribute to campaigns. They begin to vote. And even before they can do those things, they can attend rallies and agitate, or they can also communicate to their peers who can vote, who can protest without fear of visa status being jeopardized. They can talk about things with them, and so they're spreading essentially a third worldism is coming to our campuses and coming to the communities where those campuses are located, because people stay and work in those areas too. So part of why Ann Arbor went so heavily for El Said is not because he is protecting the workers, but because he's protecting third worldism. And we say third worldism is great. If you're entitled to that view. I think most Americans don't believe that, and I think it's a loser strategy.
Well, look, this is why Israel has featured so prominently in these races. And I mean, what happens in the third world? Look at what happens in the Arab world. Basically, the people in power say the reason things stink is not because we, who are the elite, who are in charge, are incompetent or corrupt or malevolent or anything like that. It's because the Jews, because that country of Israel over there.
I heard this morning.
Look at us, blame them, and we are now importing this. Why don't we have a healthcare system that functions? Well, it's because we're spending money on Israel, even though it's a tiny percent of the budget. And Bibi Netanyahu himself says, like, let's not do it anymore. They want to blame everything.
I'll say it said, there's a school down the street from me that is in no better shape than it was 40 years ago. Why are we giving money to other countries like Israel when we should be fixing the school down the street? Right. Because that next dollar is going to fix it.
Right.
I think you're stretching things here a bit, Jay.
Me?
Your own
data. Are you kidding?
Yeah, maybe just a little bit. Your own data basically shows that this is highly educated white people that are voting for this El Said character, right? These foreigners running labs and whatnot at the University of Michigan probably can't vote, right?
Yeah. So well, they eventually do.
So lies in ourselves.
It is, but it creates, it changes the intellectual culture on campus. It establishes norms of what. So, your TA tells you and rewards you with grades for spouting certain things.
Oh yeah, the campuses are far gone. There's no doubt. The faculty lean super far to the left and are pernicious in a variety of ways. I agree with all of that. And look, I think we should have a conversation about whether universities should have exemptions from these immigration caps and whatnot. It's a totally valid topic for discussion. But
no, it's fair. Look,
we have to win that primary, right? Come on.
We have plenty of problems coming from affluent suburbs of Detroit,
Right.
and so there is some kind of we have the problem of the overeducated, downwardly mobile folks who are living in cities and can't understand why they don't enjoy the same standard of living that they had growing up with one parent who's a doctor and the other who's a lawyer, and they don't understand why working for the feminism collective has not provided them with the standard. I mean, they're very smart and they're among the very best. Why are they not enjoying the standard
right
that they're accustomed to?
There is also, I mean, Jay, you and I uncovered a data point that I think does support your argument here, which was that foreign-born doctors in the United States contributed disproportionately and enormously disproportionately to the campaigns of members of the squad. So there is some indication of the track that he's described. They become citizens, they become high status, high earning people, and they continue to engage in radical activities and vote and organize. I think
a lot of those people probably are registered to vote as well. So yeah, look, this is all a valid topic for discussion. I don't mean to suggest it's not, but
it's a pipeline. I mean, look, we need to look at the UK and see what went wrong there. Like, how did they get to be as they are, and how do we not do that, right? And I think what happened is they built a pipeline, and in large part through the National Health Service, of importing Pakistani doctors that probably did not help them in maintaining their distinct and liberal British traditions, right? And I have nothing. I think immigrants can easily acquire these values over time if they come at a digestible rate, right? But if they overwhelm institutions that are supposed to assimilate them into the existing norms and the traditional political system in their new host country, then they're going to make it like home rather than like the new place.
Well, and if you come for the right reasons too,
do that if they can.
I've said this before on this podcast, but it used to be, and I don't want to, rose-colored glasses and all that, but by and large, immigrants that came to this country 100 years ago, 150 years ago, were coming to become American. That's why they came.
Some did.
Like I said, rose-colored glasses, but I think by and large, people came to be American and to live out the American dream. That, I believe, has, and I'm speaking obviously generally. Now, that has changed. And I don't know where we can trace this back to, but certainly today, I would say, generally speaking, most do not come to become American and live out the American dream. They come to it's a stripped down, bastardized version of what it was 150 years ago, where people are coming to take. and not to become. That's what I think is the difference.
I think everybody is motivated by getting access to a better life, including more economic opportunities. That's been a big motivator for immigrants.
That is the through line.
Right, and that's a good thing. I want people to strive for greater wealth, because when they strive for greater wealth, frankly, it helps build our country. I mean, your ambition is part of the energy that our country needs to continue to grow economically. But we want them to build. The question is political values. And people have always brought some home country political values, and it's always been a potential danger. I mean, the Red Scare of the 30s to the 50s was in part an imported ideology, right? This was not homegrown.
McCarthyism didn't go far enough, Jay.
It was not entirely homegrown, perhaps.
It was not entirely homegrown, right.
We've got our share of useful idiots over here. We always have.
Yes.
I agree with what Matt's saying, though. I mean, correct. I think, seeing the United States as a land of economic opportunity is the constant, but perhaps having some vision of it as being something beyond that has changed. I mean, sample size of one, but my great grandfather apparently, he tax day was his favorite day of the year. He was so unbelievably patriotic, so thankful to be in the United States that he just felt like, what an honor and a privilege to be able to contribute to this country that way. I'm not sure that we see that for people who only see the United States as an economic zone. And I think there was a time where it was selecting more for something other than just economic zone, but an idea that was inaugurated in our founding.
Right. I think there's also the problem of, if you come from a place that is incredibly corrupt, where everyone engages in corruption in order to achieve their ambitions, then if you can, the way you'll think to operate in your new place is in corrupt ways, which is kind of the Somali Minnesota problem, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that Somalis can't be very productive American citizens. Of course they can. It's just the trouble is that they're back home. This is the way things work. So I just keep doing that until someone tells me that that's not the way to do it, until I learn that there's a different way to do it, because it's the only way I've ever known. And so it's not that people are incapable of becoming loyal, good, contributing Americans. They are from all places around the world. It's just a matter of the process of that assimilation, which has a few factors, including the rate of immigrants, how far apart their home country values are from our values, and how effective our institutions are at trying to actually help them assimilate into that system. I think we're struggling on all of those dimensions.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we'll have to next week finish solving all of America's problems. Hopefully the right people are tuning in so they could know exactly what they need to do.
Well, I certainly hope our friends at AFC are tuning in. They're our most loyal viewers. We really appreciate you.
They probably account for half our viewership, so we do appreciate it.
No, not half. There are 5 of us.
Yes, that's true. Once again, we forgot to do our paid sponsorship. We'll remember next week.
Right. We'll work on saying all 0 of them, giving mention to all 0 of them. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Matt was a late addition. We're glad to have you, Mr. Ladner. Everyone have a great Wednesday.
Take care.
See ya.